take a look at the dominant seventh fingerings, so the arpeggio fingerings. Now the example that you can download is set in G, but we're going to move it up to C. Okay, so you can still practice the G arpeggio fingerings. You can practice those and then move them to another key. So I'm going to use this example. I'm going to stray away from the common way of doing stuff and put it into the key of F major or F minor as the C7. Okay? The first thing you want to know is there's altered and unaltered dominants, right? Okay. The altered dominants actually belong to the minor key. So if we were in C7 and we went to the, minor key is F minor. Now this obviously comes from minor scales. The dominant seventh chord that goes and resolves to major obviously comes from the major scale. So the modal differences, if you're a person that thinks in modes, you would be thinking of the differences between the two in terms of the fingerings, starting on the fifth of the chord. So there's a different scale related to the key, the home key that you are in. So the 5 is functioning here as a dominant that is not altered if it's in a major key, or a dominant that is altered if it's in a minor from a minor key. Okay, I would point out that in the majority of music, jazz and swing, gypsy jazz, swing, the 5 chord, altered or unaltered, either way, can be used on its way home, which means to its tonic chord, tonic key. So it doesn't matter whether you have a to this or you had this. It could be anything. Okay? A lot of times in gypsy jazz, the altered dominant is implied, even if it's in a major key. So you can interchange these things, but you have to understand where the function is first before you change something. So let's look at the unaltered dominant. So the unaltered dominant that arpeggio there, the dominant seventh arpeggio, has 4 other, or I should say 3 other arpeggios setting inside of it. And it starts on, each one starts on one of the chord tones. So obviously C, we already know what that one is. But on each chord tone, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7, we have also an arpeggio. Now this is unaltered, meaning that it comes from the diatonic scale from which that chord is derived. So, in this case, if we were in the key of F major, and we were thinking of the C7 as the 5 chord from F major, then each of those notes that are in the dominant 7th chord there represents a note from the scale, and it also would represent a chord from the scale. So, let's take a look at that. So if we had this, let's just use the 6th string as our guide for a minute. We have an F, obviously that's F major 7. If we went to a G, we would have a G minor 7. If we went to the A, that would have an A minor 7. And if we went to the B flat, we'd have a B flat major, or B flat major 7. And then obviously skipping the C7, going to a D, we'll have a D minor. Now when we get to the E, we have a minor 7 flat 5 because that's chord number 7 in F major. Play it right here. Now the first thing you should notice is that if I put the C in there, you should hear that as a dominant 9th chord, the sound of it, as its sound, even though it is the chord number 7 from F major. The sound and in the way in which it is used, especially in, let's say, something like blues, like that sound is a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio in reality. So the notes would be, you would just basically follow your C7 arpeggio, but started on E. So you'd have the E, the G, there's your B flat, right? There's your C, and then your next note, which would be I played a C there, and that was incorrect. It's E, G, B flat, D, and then the E. So, okay, got that? So that can be used over the dominant chord. And once you get the fingering down, you can swap it out anywhere on the neck. The next one is a G minor arpeggio. And why is that? Because we're starting on G, and the arpeggio from the key that we're in is G minor. Now here, starting the note there is G, B flat, the D, and then the E, then back up to the G. If we play to here, you hear that one all the time. I mean, or you can visualize that one. Everybody visualizes that over the C7. You can see that. So there, starting from the 5th of the chord, you can play a minor arpeggio. Then we have one more note left, which is a B flat here. That's the flat 7 of the C dominant chord. And therefore, we can play what is on the 4th degree, which is a B flat major 7. So from here, B flat, so you have, okay, that's simple B flat major 7. Over the C7. This is works out pretty good if you're going to go home, because this particular arp, being the representative of the 4 chord from F major, the 4 chord and the 2 chord tend to be the same except for the roots. So if you recognize the harmonic substitutions in terms of which chord can be substituted for which other chord, then you'll see immediately that gives you the sound that you're going to go, or I should say. So when you get to the D, you have that sound if you're going home. That may not have made a lot of sense because I'm skipping over some details in that. I'll get to that in another video. So what we have here, we have 4 unaltered arps, 4 unaltered arpeggios for a dominant 7th chord. And the rule is, obviously you can start from the root. You can start from the 3rd, right? You can start from the 5th. And you can start from the flat 7 and back to the C, and we have that available to us for any dominant 7th chord that is a I would call it a non-functioning dominant 7th, and the only reason I'm saying it's non-functioning, not that you're not going to use it in a specific function, but only in the sense that it has unaltered tones in it. So some people refer to that concept of a dominant 7th chord as being either a static dominant or functioning. And so the only difference there is static means you could lay out on this all you wanted. all you want, and you would never like go back to the a tonic. So it's not really. It could theoretically, you know, be the. So you have that available to you there in terms of thinking what you could use it for. Okay, let's take a look at what the functioning dominant seventh with its tension tones are. There's only 4, okay? Doesn't matter what you call it in the upper register. You've got a 13 if you're thinking of a 6. And if somebody plays a C7 sharp 5, they could say, oh, that's a flat 13 because a half step above it is the 6 or in the upper register 13, and then they flat it. So I'll call it a flat 13. That doesn't really matter. You need to know your nomenclature for these for the notes of the chord, but there's only 4. There's a sharp 5, there's a flat 5, there's a sharp 9. I like that one here. Fingering up here is kind of weird. And then a flat 9. Now, I think you've noticed the sound of that, because that sounds like a diminished, and it is a diminished. But we'll get into how dominants and diminished work together in terms of the chord on another video, in the scale harmonization video. But in this one, I'm only thinking of the notes themselves in the chord and some things you can do with it. So if we started with a C7 sharp 5, the obvious note here would be a augmented triad. Now, an augmented triad, like C augmented, can be played in whole steps, because the scale from which augmented chords come from are whole step. Is a whole step scale. So if we use any note in that scale, but place the beginning one as the source chord, which in this case is C, we would have C augmented. We could go down A flat, there's a G flat, flat, etc. What we have here is a nice little venue of augmented triads. I played the wrong one there. I went to a regular. So you look at the notes in that. We have the C, the root, the third, and the sharp 5. That's very basic. But we can also play it over here. On this note, which would be a flatted 5th. If I'm playing a C7 flat 5 and I have an augmented triad, I would start from the flat 5. So if I'm on C7, I have a G flat. Now, what in the world? But that's basically. Sounds like. So you have those triads, triad arps, to play around with. When you go from here, that's the C augmented arp, and you go down to B flat, you're starting on the flat 7 of the chord, and you're playing that same one, and that gives you a flat 5 sound. So you can remember that in whole steps this thing works. And starting on the flatted 5th, I could go up to the sharp 5 and play that. That gives me that sharp 5, the root, and the third. So I have 2 of these. Either one, I have the sharp 5 or the flat 5 with using augmented triads, okay? Now, on the 9, we have the diminished idea. And then the diminished idea, you can start from either the flat 7, the flat 9, or which sounds really good, or even the 5th. So if I played a diminished here, I'm starting from G, that's the 5th of the C7, and then I went to the B flat, that's the flat 7 of the chord. Now I go up here, and that note is a C sharp, or a flat, a D flat, if I'm referring this to as a flat 9. So, sorry about that. Stay with the notes here. So, that arpeggio, if I keep going, I'm going to end up with the 5th, flat 7, there's the flat 9, here's the 3rd, I got the 5th again, I got the flat 7, and here's that flat 9 again, and then here's the 3rd again. What's not in there is the root, okay? But you can start that arpeggio on any of the notes of the chord. See what I'm doing there? Oops, I messed that one up. That gives you the possibility of playing an outside sound, okay? It gives you that flat 9 sound, okay? But what happens if I want to do a sharp 9 sound? That, on this outside sound here, that's when you can start it from the root, okay? Start the diminished arpeggio from the root. See? That will give you the sharp 9 sound. So you're using something from just a half step apart there. So if you had let's say you had the diminished starting from the flat 9, and you wanted to emphasize the sharp 9, you move it down, messed it up a note there. That gives you both, okay? So you can move in half steps. Now where did that come from? It came from the diminished scale. It came from the half, whole, diminished. Some people could think of it as being a whole half, but I look at it as being, if you're on C, and you go up to C sharp, or D flat, you've got that flat 9. So, in that case, you have whole, starting with half steps. Half step, whole step, half step, whole step. And you can line that up on the guitar all the way. So on the C here, let's say I'm going like this. Okay, if I'm starting here and I went up to, let's start here on, let's see, something that you can follow here. So if I'm starting on the C here, I've got that one. I go up a half step, I got another diminished arpeggio. I go up a whole step, got another one. Half step, got another one. Whole step, got another one. Got a half step there as another one. Whole step, half step, then finally back to the root again of the C. So we have arpeggios all over the place here that are sitting inside the altered dominant chord. So again, I will say, as a basic rule of thumb, sharp 5, flat 5s, you can use augmented arpeggios over that. As the sharp 9 or a flat 9, you can use the diminished arpeggios of that. Now the diminished is used a lot more than the other one is, but the I would say the augmented is a lot easier to deal with in terms of the sound that you're trying to look for on the fretboard. Let's say we're on an E7, and I played an E augmented triad, and then I went up to B flat. And then I'm going to play an E augmented triad again. I've got a nice little line there. Now, why did I go to a B flat? It's the tritone of the E7. So what that's going to tell you is that, let me go back to C, and this will make more sense. So if I went back to C, and I played a C7 flat 5 chord, the tritone of that C is G flat or F sharp. Now, if you look at the notes in that C7 flat 5 chord, you'll notice that if I just change the root, I'm going to have to change my finger there, and put the root on the F sharp, I've got another dominant chord. Okay, even if I put, this is only for fingering purpose, but even if I put that finger right there to make the 5th in the bass, thinking of it as that chord. But the tritone is C if I'm on F sharp, and if I'm on C, the tritone is F sharp. So the only difference is what note is on the bottom. So the rule is a dominant 7 flat 5 chord, its tritone substitution starts on the flat 5, and it's the same set of notes except for that root note. So you can see that this could be interchangeable when you start to think of things to play over it, because you've got a augmented in there. And that makes things a lot more interesting if you want to create some altered sounds, altered tensions, thinking of that note. We'll create some long lines that you could use using all these tensions, and I will place them either in the extended section on diminished and dominant function, or I might place them actually in the lick section, which I'm going to add to shortly, which really they are not licks, but they're things that short phrases that you can remember. So a lot of times people will use, like for example, they'll use the diminished. Let's say if we went down here, let's go down to here. So you can walk that up and down the neck in minor thirds, because each time you go from a diminished, you can move it up a minor third. Okay, and that gives you that flat 9 sound. Like I said, if it was a sharp 9 sound you were looking for, you would start it from the root of the chord that diminished. But in most of these cases, especially in gypsy jazz, like if you're playing da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. See, you have the Dark Eyes tune, and you have that flat 9 sound, even if you don't use the flat 9. And it wants to resolve, right? Now that parental scale there was, since the song is in D minor, that parental scale was the D harmonic minor. And if you played it from A, you call it a, excuse me, you call it the Phrygian major, which is just another modal name for mode 5 of harmonic minor. Modes, believe me, save the modes for another time. We'll look at the modes separately. That gets into just a bunch of more theory stuff, and you don't really need a lot of that. A little bit will go a long way. So anyway, to recap, we've got a static dominant 7th, you know, a non-functioning one we call it, or one with natural tensions with the 4 arpeggios starting on the 3rd, starting on the 5th, starting on the flat 7 inside of that chord, okay, which will outline the extensions that you would normally think of, like that you wanted to use. Then you have the tension version, or the functioning dominant 7th that wants to go home. sharp. Right? And that gives you an overview, basically, of the dominant seventh arpeggio, both types. Now, the goal is to make use of them, right? All right, so we'll look at that the next time. All right, see you soon.